Reputation is trust revealed in public. Reputation, last week we talked about lifetime value. Lifetime value is when the customer or client executes a repeat purchase because they're demonstrating trust in private. It's a transaction with the business and the customer on a repeating cycle, lifetime value. When that client is so much trust that they're willing to refer or review you in public, that's revealing their level of trust in a public setting. So, good afternoon. Over the past few weeks, GHL Business Launch, we've been talking about the following chain. We talked about how automation reveals the system that is running inside the business. And then we looked at how that system produces the customer experience, which is point 7 of the 9-point marketing plan. Then we looked at how the system produces point 7 is, strike that, reverse it. We looked at how automation reveals the system. And then we looked at how the system produces the customer experience, how the customer journey from product unaware through product aware through a buying decision and to making a purchase decision and the fulfillment of that initial purchase. That's point 7 of the 9-point marketing plan. Then we looked at how, and that the system is what makes that feel smooth and logical or disjointed and a struggle. Then we looked at customer experience. We looked at or lifetime value. We looked at if that process is smooth and consistent and it produces trust over time. That is point 8 of the marketing plan because that is the lifetime value of the customer. That's those repeat transactions start happening. It's a demonstration of trust that this process is getting me what I need and want, and the way the process works for me. And this way, we're going to take it to point 9 of the 9-point marketing plan. We're going to take it a step further because when trust becomes visible to other people, that is the reputation of the business. That's the lesson. Not because reviews are magical, not because testimonials are persuasive little pieces of marketing copy, and not because referrals are a clever marketing tactic. Not even because social proof can somehow generate trust when trust doesn't exist. This is not training on how to build a system, how to build an automation to ask for more reviews. It's not a tactics lesson on referral campaigns. It's not a tactics lesson on a loyalty system. It's not a feature demonstration for reputation management tools. It's not a best practices session on public praise collection, on public relations campaigns. It's a structural lesson, a system lesson. Because those reviews, referrals, testimonials, and social proof are not reputation creation tactics. They are the way that the marketplace reveals or makes visible the trust that your system has already produced, or reveals the lack of trust that your system has already produced. And that's it. That's the core lesson for today. And the implementation layer is also straightforward. Yes, the tools in high level can help you capture and organize the signal, but they do not replace judgment, context, or relationship. Reputation is trust revealed publicly. The reviews do not create the trust. They reveal or make visible the trust that the system has produced. And this distinction matters because a lot of people talk about reviews as though review systems, as though the request creates the reputation. It does not. The request reveals something. It surfaces a feeling. The surface that it reveals might be good. The surface might be weak. The surface might be mixed. The surface might even be distorted. But whatever appears publicly is downstream of something that the system already taught the client in private. So, if the system has produced clarity, follow through, trust, relief, confidence, consistency, then the public signal is likely to reflect that. Conversely, if the system has produced confusion, weak boundaries, premature asks, mismatch, awkward follow, operational blindness, then the public signal will reflect that as well. Which is why I'm saying this clearly. A review request cannot manufacture a relationship that the system has not already earned. If you ask for the review before the trust exists, the system will reveal the lack of trust. That's not a reviews problem. It's a system timing problem. When people think about reviews and referrals, they often think in very tactical terms. They think that they should ask more often, that they should automate the request. They think about reviews in tactical terms. They think ask more often, automate the request, change the wording, try a different channel, send a reminder. They use AI to draft the replies. They think about posting the testimonial everywhere. All those are the tactical tools. And yes, there's a place for implementation. But implementation is not the centerpiece. Implementation is the how you do the thing. The centerpiece is what and why you're doing. Point 9 of the 9-point marketing plan is not mainly how do I get public proof? It is the question, what public signal is my system generating? Because if we have the whole chain right, point 9 of the 9-point marketing plan is the market reflecting what happened during points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This means if the wrong audience was targeted, the wrong message was used, the wrong channel produced wrong expectations, the delivery was unclear, the experience was inconsistent, trust did not actually compound before the request, then point 9 will surface that reality. Not politely, necessarily, but honestly. And that is why reviews and referrals are so useful and also so dangerous. They're useful because they tell the truth. They're dangerous because people will sometimes try to use them as cover. People want the public proof before they have private trust. And here's the reality. The system will usually reveal itself anyway. So I'd like to frame point 9 this way. Reputation is the public visibility of trust that was produced privately by the system. Reputation is the public visibility of trust that was produced privately by the system. This is the right frame because it keeps this lesson from turning into a tactics discussion, and it ties to our curriculum. We're not talking, we're not leaving the structure conversation, we're continuing it. We're talking about the business that is running, the system that is running inside your business. So we go back to the system definition. Because if reputation reveals the system, then we should be clear about what we mean by the system. For our discussion, a system is the structure that determines how decisions, responsibilities, and outcomes connect inside the business. That means that public reputation is not floating out there somewhere in cyberspace, disconnected from the business. It is not random. It is not entirely emotional. It is not only branding. It is not merely the copywriting. It is not the customer personality. It is a visible consequence of an internal structure that has been touching people over time. So the chain for today is system leads to experience. Experience leads to trust or distrust. And that trust or distrust is revealed as reputation. The system is the internal structure. The experience is how the client feels. Trust is the conclusion the client reaches over time. And reputation is what that client then makes visible to other people, which is why the title of the slide actually matters. Reputation reveals the system because the system produced it privately. The market is revealed to the market publicly. What the system produced privately is revealed to the market publicly. If the system is coherent, experience is clear, trust forms more easily, reputation becomes stable. If the system is misaligned, the experience is distorted. Trust is fragile. Reputation is noisy, inconsistent, even misleading. And this is one of the reasons that reviews and referrals are not merely promotional assets. They are also diagnostic signals. They reveal what kind of trust is being built, how clearly it was built, whether the outcome of the client experience matched the promise of the client expectation. It reveals whether the relationship is making sense to the client. And that's why I like this framing. Reviews and referrals do not validate your intentions. They reveal the reality of your system. Because the customer does not write a review about your intentions. They write a review about the result that your system produced for them. So let's look at some ways that these things can be disconnected or congruent. And this first most obvious example is an ask that is too early versus an ask that comes after trust is built. The exact same business model, the exact same product delivery, but in a different system produces a different public result. In the first system, the review request goes out too early, maybe immediately after the invoice. maybe immediately after an appointment check-in, a first appointment check-in, maybe immediately after the workflow reaches a specific milestone in the sequence. In those cases, the automation is technically correct. And for the business owner, it feels efficient. The trigger fired exactly when it was configured to fire. But the client has not yet experienced enough result to know what they really think about the product. The value is not yet fully realized. The relationship is not yet stable enough for trust to have formed. The experience is still in progress, and yet the review request goes out to the customer anyway. And what does this create? Sometimes the client just ignores it. Sometimes the client feels awkward. Sometimes they will write a shallow review because they don't know what else to say. They feel this subtle social pressure, even though they're saying to themselves, wait, I've been asked to publicly affirm something that I haven't even fully experienced yet. And sometimes the system actually teaches something even worse. It teaches that this business is more eager to get public praise than to actually produce the outcome. If you ask before trust exists, the system will reveal the lack of trust. Because at that point, the request itself becomes a signal. It's signaling not that we have earned this, but we are hoping to collect from this, extract from this, before the relationship has even proven itself. And we can compare that or contrast that with a system that earns the review first. The client has experienced the value. They're confident in what happened. They know whether it worked or whether it didn't work. The trust conclusion has had time to form. They are now able to interpret the experience. So when the request comes in, it's not an awkward ask. It's a natural invitation to articulate something that the client already knows. And what happens then? The client is more willing. They're also more specific. Their message is more authentic. The connection between what they're saying and the experience they had is more congruent. And the audience can feel that congruence. Because the review is reflecting an actual relationship instead of standing in for a relationship that has not yet fully formed. This is an important distinction because timing does not create trust. Timing reveals whether trust exists yet. And this is exactly why premature solicitation is such an important failure mode. Not because the automation is bad, not because asking for the review is bad, but because timing resulted in the system trying to surface a public signal before trust had been cultivated in private. Or let's move from timing to interpretation. Because once the review system is running, there's this other temptation. It's the temptation to assume that the tool understands the relationship. And it's just simply not true. In the first version of the system, the automation does what it is designed to do, what it is capable of doing. what it can do. It can request a review. The client can leave the review, but the client has used a different account identity than the one that the business has on file. They used a different email. In my case, I used my personal Google account to leave reviews. That's rarely the one that I've registered with a business as their client or signed up for their lead magnet. There's a different phone number or a different name format associated with the review. The human being behind the review is actually the exact same person, but the data pattern is not a confident match. And so this is what happens. The system concludes that a review hasn't come in yet. And because the system thinks that no review exists, it keeps asking. And so the client gets another message and another. And at some point, they start thinking, wait, I already did this. Why are they asking again? Does this business not know what is happening? And that's not a minor issue. This is an operational blindness becoming part of the customer experience. This is point 9 of the marketing plan, reflecting back to point 8. And once it becomes part of the customer experience, it becomes part of trust. More accurately, it becomes a reinforcer of distrust. So the client reaction is predictable. It's confusion, it's annoyance, it's a sense that the system is not really aware of them. It produces an erosion of trust because the business appears to not know what has already happened. And we can contrast this with a human in the loop system. The automation can still surface the signal. The automation organizes the possibility, but a human checks the context. The human correlates the review with the records. The human can stop the review sequence intentionally. Relationship logic, the human factor, overrides blind automations. This is a much healthier system because it acknowledges an important truth. The tool can organize signal. The tool cannot interpret relationship. Because the tool is very good at prompting, collecting, surfacing, organizing. It is not always very good at knowing what human gave the signal, understanding the nuance across identities mismatches, interpreting the relationship context without human oversight. This is exactly why human in the loop is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that the business understands the limits of automation and AI. And since I've mentioned AI, let's talk specifically about reviews AI within high level, because one of the places where the implementation layer becomes especially useful and especially risky. Reviews AI can be very, very helpful. It can draft responses. It can speed up the organization. It can help express the business. It can make it easier to respond consistently across different public platforms. It can help maintain the brand tone, the brand message, the brand values. All of that is very real. It can remove the human emotional reaction in the moment so that the message stays consistent. One thing that I notice is I react very differently to the exact same message at different times in the day. It could be the exact same message at mid-morning, and I will respond much more calmly and with more empathy than the same message at or close to midnight. So just because the review comes in and a human needs to respond to that review, what we can use Reviews AI is draft a response so that this response is the same tone and style. Then the human takes the human operator's emotion out of it to just approve or disapprove the draft as written. Because we need to be very careful about what the tool does not own. The tool doesn't own company policy. The tool does not have authority. Specifically, the tool shouldn't grant compensation to the client. The tool shouldn't, the tool probably doesn't have capacity to manage expectation handling. And the tool should not obligate the business. The tool can help express the business. It should not improvise the business. When we look at the unguarded version, in the unguarded version, the AI suggests or auto-posts a reply. And the LLM will default toward agreeableness. And it's going to offer refunds, compensations, and accommodations. It will likely apologize, but maybe out of scope. And it will create obligations that the business never approved. And once that happens publicly, now you have a very awkward problem because the business now has to either honor the unapproved promise because it was made in public or issue a public retraction. And neither of those is good for the business. Both of those reveal distrust. Both of those generate distrust. And what happened? An authority gap inside the system was revealed publicly for all the world to see. And the business looks less coherent. The risk to trust increases, not because the AI is malicious, but because AI was allowed to operate where authority boundaries were not clearly defined. And we can contrast that with a system that has guardrails in place. Yes, the AI is assisting with drafts, but the guardrails limit the promises that the AI makes. Authority boundaries are defined in the prompts or in the surrounding approval logic, and human approval remains in place in those cases where judgment is needed. Now, the public response reflects the actual business policy and the actual client-customer relationship. This is a much healthier situation because in this version, the tool helps, but the business owns the decision. The public reply stays inside the authority that has actually been granted to the reviews reply system. Reviews AI can help express the business. It should not be allowed to improvise the business's obligations. And that anchor line belongs in this lesson because it ties directly to authority, responsibility, human oversight, governance, public trust that we've been talking about since the start of this year. These are the foundational business decisions that each of us needs to make about how we are going to present in the marketplace. And then there are the so-called bad reviews, the invalid complaints, and the out-of-scope expectations. We're moving to this other important failure mode. This one is subtle and extremely relevant because sometimes the complaint itself is not valid in the way it is publicly presented, or the expectation behind it was outside the scope of the relationship from the very beginning. So imagine in the first version of the system, a complaint comes in publicly. The AI defaults toward agreement and apology because what LLMs do, they try to be agreeable. They try to be soothing. They try to reduce tension. But what if the reviewer was never even a customer? Or what if the complaint describes a service that was outside the scope of the offer? Or what if the review was written in a way that frames the customer in a better light than was actually true? Because yes, the customer is always right, except that the customer is not always right. So if the business responds with general public agreeableness anyway, what happens? The business has publicly validated a false frame. The business has reinforced a confusion. The business has taught a wrong expectation. And the reviews and the replies to the review have now created a public record which is less truthful, not coherently more truthful. And this creates a situation where reputation management starts becoming something different than a public sharing of successes. It stops being about clarity and starts becoming about distortion. And if we can compare that or contrast that with a contextualized response, the review comes in, but the business checks the status. It confirms whether the reviewer actually was a customer. It checks whether the complaint is inside scope of the offer and the product that that customer purchased. Yes, responding with empathy and clarity, but not with a reflexive surrender, not a reflexive surrender, because good reputation management is not the same as public capitulation. Reputation management is about public clarity and public relations of the core message. Reputation management is not about public agreeableness. It is public clarity under the constraint of the relationship that actually occurred. That is a stronger and more mature version of the lesson. Because the goal of reputation management is not always to agree, it's not always to apologize, and it's not always to concede, and it's not always to compensate or accommodate. The goal of the reputation management system should be to understand context, help others understand context, preserve truth, respect the relationships, communicate clearly, and avoid teaching a wrong expectation. This slide is very important because it shows that reputation systems are not only about being nice or kind or accommodating. Yes, we can be polite, but we should be accurate. We should have public clarity in our messaging. And this matters because reputation is trust revealed publicly, not confusion restated politely. And we're going to talk about high level as the implementation layer, high level as the set of tools. And this part is important because I do want to acknowledge the tools. But what I'm suggesting is that we keep them in their correct place in the business. Inside the ecosystem that revolves around the high-level operating system, there is a excessive focus on the toolkit, the tool shed, as I call it. But the tools are not the centerpiece of the reputation management system. The tools are the implementation of the reputation management. The tools are the implementation layer beneath the lesson. And high level can help a lot here. High level can trigger the review request. It can vary the messaging on each of the different channels, email, text, WhatsApp, in a DM or Messenger. The trigger can stop sending messages if the click-through happens. We can collect videos. We can collect testimonials both by text and by video. We can bring the reviews to the surface. We can pull out sentiment from our conversations with our client. We can use that sentiment to decide when to send the review request. We can enable direct responses as the business in public. We can run the reviews AI in either suggestive or automatic mode. We can then, when we get the review, we can use that as social proof, as content on our social planner. And all of those things are useful. Each of those functions corresponds to a real implementation need. Review request workflows are useful for timing and consistency. Reviews AI is useful for drafting, for speed, for consistency, for organization. The video testimonial collector is useful for developing, drawing out richer forms of social proof, shaping the way the person responds by querying them to respond to address particular concerns from their experience, or particular items from their experience. And auto sharing on social planner is useful for syndicating the already earned public trust. So I'm not anti-toolkit here. Very much the opposite. These are very useful tools. What I'm advocating for is keeping the doctrinal order correct. Because the tools capture and organize signal. They don't create the trust that the signal is based on. The challenge is, once the tools become powerful, the temptation will be to assume that they can substitute for timing, judgment, context, authority, relationships. And they can't. Which is why I want to keep one more line in play. The more powerful the system becomes, the more important timing, authority, and judgment become. This is not a statement against automation. It is a statement for mature automation. I'm saying, yes, use the tools, but do not ask the tools to own what only the business can own. And we're going to bring Alex back into the mix for just a brief moment, because Alex is still useful here. Alex is the same operator But when he has different systems, there is a different public relationship, different public reputation outcome. In the original version of Alex, we have broad promises, vague and flexible boundaries, an unclear role or offer. And this results in mixed client experiences, leading to inconsistent public signal. And the testimonials, the reviews, and the referrals become incoherent because one person says, he did great work on my SEO, and another person says, I really had a great experience with the email sequence that he wrote. And these are very different technical tasks. One client thinks of Alex as a strategist, another thinks of Alex as a tech support guy. One client thinks of Alex as an implementer, and another client has lumped Alex into the vague gray, my marketing guy bubble. And what happens to public reputation in this situation is it becomes muddy. The testimonials are vague. The referrals are less accurate to the ideal client that Alex actually is really good at serving. The reviews are reinforcing different promises. And the public signal is inconsistent because the system is inconsistent. And we contrast that with the declared Alex. There's a clear offer. There's clear support paths. There's clear advisory boundaries. What is and is not coaching guidance versus outsourced to someone else. There's clear client outcomes. And the public signal starts to align. The referrals become accurate to Alex's declared business model. The testimonials start sounding specific to what he does and how well he does it. And the reviews reinforce that promise. And this matters because the market can only repeat what the system has made legible. The point is not merely Alex needs better copy. The point is Alex needs a clear system so that the public trust signal becomes coherent and reinforcing of Alex's copy. Reputation starts becoming clearer as the system becomes clearer. So we're going to make this personal because these are not tactics questions, they're recognition questions. And I like to ask them in the first person because they become a mirror that is facing in the right direction. Think of them this way. Think of each of these as picking up a mirror, looking yourself in the eye, and saying, what part of my system is responsible for the trust that my reviews are supposed to reveal? Where is my business asking for public proof before the relationship has even produced private trust? What public reputation signal is my system currently generating, even if it's not what I intended? What review, referral, testimonial would be impossible unless my system changed first? What part of my system is actually responsible for the trust my reviews are supposed to reveal? This is very important. Because if the answer is, I really don't know, or nothing specific, or I hope the request sequence does it, then that starts telling you something. In fact, I have a friend who his entire business is doing client interviews on behalf of businesses. If you have a business that you have like 20 or 30 customer database that's broad enough that he can do some interviews, he can actually tell you things about your business that you don't know yet. Because your customers will tell him things that they won't tell you. Or question two, where is my business asking for public proof before the relationship has even produced private trust? This is the timing question. And it's one of the sharpest questions in the lesson. Because if the ask is premature, your system will reveal that trust doesn't exist yet. Sometimes it will reveal it by silence. Sometimes it will reveal it with a review that you really don't want on your Google or on your social media. And now it's on your social media. Question three, what public reputation signal is my system currently generating, whether or not it is what I intend? This one matters a lot because public reputation is happening whether you are consciously managing it or not. The system is generating a signal, and its signal is not about what you intend. It's not even about what you do. Going back to last week, it is about what the customer experienced. You might have had fantastic intentions. You might have delivered everything that you know that you promised. But if it felt discombobulated and out of alignment to the customer, their review that they write will reflect that disconnect rather than the delivery of what you thought you promised. The question is whether the signal that is shared in public is the truth that you want to be made visible. And question four, what review, referral, or testimonial will be impossible unless my system changed first? This is very strong because it forces the issue all the way back to the business structure. Not how do I word the ask better, but what would have to be true about my actual underlying business model, my business system, my business processes for the kind of public trust that would result in the signal coming out honestly, without asking, without prompting, that I actually want to be revealed in public. And I bet for most of us, what we want people to say about us in public isn't actually based, it doesn't, the foundation isn't laid there yet. The foundation in the system isn't laid there for what we actually want people to say about us. And if you can answer these questions honestly, looking in that mirror, the lesson has done its job. Because at that point, you're no longer treating your reviews, your referrals, your testimonials, and social proof as a promotional add-on to your messaging. You're looking at them as downstream evidence of what your system is or is not. So we're going to bring this together. Today's lesson is not reviews matter, because absolutely they do. The lesson is not social proof is powerful, because it is, but that is too shallow. And it is not, here's how to get more video testimonials. Because yes, that video exists. I have one of those videos on this channel, on the YouTube channel. But how to get the video testimonial would miss the point entirely. The lesson for today is this: reputation is trust revealed publicly. Reputation is trust revealed publicly. Reviews, referrals, testimonials, social proof are not reputation creation tactics. They are the ways that the market makes visible the trust or distrust that your system has already produced. This is why a review request cannot manufacture a relationship that the system has not already earned. This is why asking too early reveals a lack of trust. This is why AI without guardrails can create authority problems in the public's view. This is why human judgment matters, even in an environment that has powerful implementation tools. And this is why the public signal always points back to the internal structure of the business. If trust compounds privately in the transaction, the market messaging will eventually reflect that in public. And if the market never reflects trust in public, one of the key things that is worth examining is whether the system is really producing trust in private at all. And that leads us to the next set of couple lessons. Because a sustainable system is not one where you can ask for a review forever. A sustainable system is one that keeps producing consistent client experiences that build trust and is worth that client repeating their experience in public. In conclusion, reputation is trust revealed publicly. And reviews do not create trust. They make visible the trust that the system has already earned. Thank you for thinking about this with me today.